Welcome back. So what did this new shark research reveal? A study jointly published last month by researchers from Mote Marine and Cuba's University of Havana uncovered the traveling patterns of the rare long-fin mako shark. Tracking efforts were done in 2012 and 2015, showing the sharks traveled an average of 36 miles per day. But what does that study mean for our understanding of the species, and what could it mean for U.S.-Cuban relations? Joining us for more on this effort and U.S.-Cuban relations is Patrick Montega, editor and publisher of La Gaceta newspaper, Dr. Bob Cuter, director of the Center for Shark Research at Mote Marine, and joining us via Skype from Havana is Dr. Jorge Angulo Valdez, head of the Marine Conservation Research Group at the University of Havana. Thank you all for joining us, and Doctor, it's an honor. It's the first interview we have done live from Cuba, so welcome to our broadcast. And let me ask you first out, what did you learn from this research, and how was it affected and aided by you being able to work with the folks from Mote Marine Lab?
First of all, the most important thing I have learned from this research and others that we do is that it is possible to work together despite our political difference, and also that it's very important that we focus on the issues that really matter for our two populations, for our two countries. Our natural resources are important for both of us. We depend on those resources, so we have to put away any political difference and work for the common good.
And Bob, why is this research in terms of this type of shark, just for people watching us right now, why is it so important?
Well, Alan, in this case, sharks are sort of they're the charismatic banner for this kind of work together. I'm a shark expert. I've been working on sharks more than 40 years, so my particular interest is in sharks. And in fact, they represent the types of marine resources that go back and forth between our two countries. So they're appropriate study animals for this kind of work to understand what we call the connectivity of our marine resources. But it goes so much beyond that. And I think what Jorge and I have learned over 12 years of working together is that the research that we do, the papers that we publish will be important in terms of its impact in the scientific world, but the greater impact is going to be the relationships that we've established between our institutions, our own families, and the families and institutions of Cuba.
Patrick, I remember a day where the waters between here and Cuba were so tense because of whether it was, if you go back to the early 1960s, the blockade of Cuba, the Mariel boat lift, the efforts by some Cubans to reach the U.S., that it would be hard to imagine that this kind of research between the two countries would have been possible.
Back then, you're absolutely right. We certainly are glad, though, many of us, that it is possible today. The Florida Strait should be a connection between us, not a divide as it has been. And it's nice to see that we no longer have to shout at each other across the Straits of Florida, and instead can shake hands and work together.
Jorge, could you describe to us what kind of almost hoops you had to jump through to get this kind of research going in the first place with your American partners?
Well, as you know, political difference affects every single aspect of human life. And in our case, the hurdles have been different and has been very big sometimes. They have come from authorization permits to get on board of boat, to do the research, to import some of the equipment that are going to be deployed, and then the animals that we capture. But also there are other hurdles like cultural difference between our two, or between us, and also language barriers. All of those hurdles, we have seen them as challenges, and as such, we were able to overcome them by focusing our work on what is important and putting on the table what really matters.
You're saying that one benefit in terms of working with the folks from Mote Marine Lab is the technology that they can employ on this project. Bob, what kind of benefit does it make to the folks at Mote Marine Lab having Cuban partners?
Well, first of all, let me just say that as scientists, we all speak the same language. So when we reach out to folks in Cuba, we were able to communicate beyond these cultural differences, and then we eventually break through some of the other problems that Jorge mentioned. I'll tell you a quick story that I was a grad student at the University of Miami a million years ago, and I used to go down in the Keys and dive in the Keys and go down to Key West and look south and know that Cuba was 90 miles away. And as a scientist, know that I was told that you can't go there, you can't study what's going on there, and yet understanding, having a feeling for the fact that the fish that were in the Keys were traveling over to Cuba and vice versa. So what we gain by having this relationship is a way to look, in some ways, to look into a time machine, look into the past, because Cuba has done such a great job in protecting many of their resources.
Okay, there is so much more to discuss, along with a check on our forecast coming up after this break, so stay with us. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are discussing the collaboration between researchers at Mote Marine here in Sarasota and the University of Havana in Cuba. Our guests tonight are Patrick Montega of La Gazeta newspaper, Dr. Bob Huder of the Mote Marine Lab, and joining us by Skype is Dr. Jorge Angulo Valdez of the University of Havana. Welcome back, everybody. Bob, you know, this is incredible work that you're doing, but we have a new president coming in who, as we said at the outset of this broadcast, has been talking tough on Cuba. Are you concerned that he will reverse course and make research projects like this more difficult to do?
Well, I mean, of course we're concerned. We don't know what's going to happen, and Jorge alluded to this as well. I am hopeful that, and this is kind of a naive scientist's point of view of this, I'm hopeful that the business side of this administration will see the benefits of us moving forward, continuing to move forward and engage in the way that President Obama started on the path that he started us on a few years ago.
When we did open the relationship with Cuba and normalize it, what difference did it make about how you were able to do what you do?
Well, I'd been working in Cuba about 10 years before that, so had gone through all this difficult process of having to qualify for travel and all that sort of thing. When President Obama made his declaration in December of 2014, it put us on a path where logistically things got easier, travel got easier, paying for things got easier, but a lot of the basic challenges still remain.
Like what?
Well, for example, we're not allowed to use any kind of federal or state funding, any kind of government funding for any of the work we do in Cuba, and that really, really ties our hands.
So Patrick, what do you think is going to happen now? I mean, has this been all bluster in terms of all the talk about basically shutting down the normalization, or do you suspect that the Trump administration is going to move forward?
Well, first of all, let me define where we're at. We are normalizing relationships. It is far from normal. The official U.S. government policy is the overthrow of the Cuban government. Hard to have real friendly relations when that is your stated goal in life. It's kind of like the Palestinians and the Israelis. You know, somebody's got to say, hey, we're not fighting you anymore. So we're trying to normalize relations, but it's far from normal. The president's been, our new president's been all over the place on this. He's put some people in powerful positions that in the past have been hardliners on Cuba. I think we'll know very soon, though, there's a provision of the Helms-Burton Act that every president has put a waiver on for since Clinton, and that would allow Cuban nationals, people who used to live in Cuba, to sue as if they were U.S. citizens when they were living in Cuba, and that was U.S. property that was taken during the early 60s. That waiver of Section 3 has kept things somewhat normal, but if we go and allow that to happen, all heck's going to break loose. You
know, in Adam's story, the professor there said that it took a long time to normalize to the point that we have. It would not be something that's easy to unwind, but the same could be said for the Affordable Health Care Act. It's not going to be that easy to do it all away, but they're still going to try. Are you concerned they're still going to try in terms of normalizations with Cuba?
Like I said, it's hard to tell. He's been all over the place, but we'll know very shortly.
Jorge, have you had any discussions with your colleagues about what happens now, and or if you're going to be able to continue this research with your friends from Mote Marine should the policy of the American government change?
Yes, that's been a very important topic that we have been discussing here since the results of the election back in November. But I have to say something. We Cubans are used to work in hard times. So we have had difficult times. Other times have not been that difficult. After Obama and Raul Castro made their declaration in December 2014, things were a lot better, like my friend Bob mentioned it. Now, we have the feeling, and we are optimistic by the fact that we consider that the Cuba train has already departed the station. And there is a lot of in stake there, and we have to really focus on what is important. As I mentioned before, just put aside our political differences and find ways of collaboration and bilateral collaboration, which is, in my opinion, the true backbone of this relationship.
Are there other areas of research that really is needed in the waters between here and Havana and the rest of Cuba that really the science community is basically demanding and needs to have done and can benefit by this relationship?
No, yes, that's for sure. We should think in using science as a bridge for communication and collaboration. We have to focus on the issues that affected our two countries and then find a scientific solution to that. And other disciplines of science that can be benefited from this are not only marine, but also social, historical, economical, legal. There are many other things that can be done together for the well-being of our two countries that they for sure overpass any political difference.
And Bob, I think you had something to say?
Well, I was going to say this environmental bridge that we've created between Cuba and the United States through our work, it's even more critical because we're here in Florida. If we were discussing this up in Washington, we might have a different slant on things. But in Florida, we truly share the same environment with Cuba. When we have hurricanes come up through the Caribbean into the Gulf, they're coming from Cuba to Florida or vice versa. We share water, we share fish.
But Patrick, and we only have less than a minute left here, but the members of the Florida congressional delegation, Marco Rubio, Bill Nelson, and the members of Congress, they're all over the board about whether they want this relationship to continue to be opened up.
You're absolutely right. There's 100 reasons why to expand our relationship, everything from drug interdiction to hurricane preparedness to oil drilling and the protection of our waters. There's one reason not to, and those are the Cuban exiles in Miami. And so the question is are these people going to listen to a small group of very loud people in Miami, or are they going to listen to what's best for all Floridians?
Okay, let's take a quick break, but when we return, we'll have final thoughts from our guests, plus what some of our viewers are saying about the future of race relations under the Trump administration. Welcome back. How will the collaboration between researchers in the U.S. and Cuba benefit the scientific community, and can our politicians take a lesson from the University of Havana and Montmarine? Our guests join us now for final thoughts. Jorge, what do you want our viewers to take away from this conversation tonight?
Well, I would like to have our viewers to understand and really comprehend the situation here, that we are two countries separated by 90 miles of water. It's a long bridge, and it's not a separation. And both communities, both people are important, and we depend on natural resources. So we have to get common sense in our life and allow things to happen and avoid conflicts and work for the good for everybody, not for just a handful of people.
And Bob, right now the research continues.
Yeah, and we know that engaging and continuing along normalization is the best thing for science. It's the best thing, I think, probably for business, for American business as well as the Cubans. It's the best thing for our people. And I think as a people, as a society here, we have to decide whether we're going to choose history over the future.
Patrick, this normalization has been going incredibly slowly, even since President Obama restored relations. I mean, it's unlikely, I would imagine, that the pace will quicken and faster under a President Trump.
You know, I was surprised to see us eliminate the wet foot, dry foot policy last week. President Obama signed that. He got rid of another bad provision in our relations. And Trump has not said that he wants to back off, that he wants to reinstate that. So maybe that's a good sign that down the road he will continue to allow these things to happen. We'll just have to wait and see.
Thank you very much. Before we go, we want to share with you what some of our viewers are saying about last night's show, Race Relations under Donald Trump. During his campaign, Trump asked those in the minority community, "What do you have to lose?" He outlined a 10-point plan to improve education and lower crime in inner cities, but not everyone is convinced race relations will improve under Trump. Here's what some of you are saying. Virginia Deese writes, "After watching this man's poisonous tongue all through the campaign, I am confident that he is going to set back equality about 50 years. Everything we fought for in the 60s and 70s will be gone." Joshua Von Stone Foster writes, "After 8 years of the most racially polarizing American political since George Wallace, almost anyone would be an improvement on Obama." And Chad Helmuth writes, "No matter what race, what religion, what sex, you're never going to make everyone happy. Love thy neighbor, treat them as you wish to be treated. All one can do is try." Well, if you'd like to join the conversation about tonight's topic, just visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. And FYI, want to watch past Roundtable discussions? They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. Thanks to our guests for being here tonight. Patrick Montega is editor and publisher of La Gaceta newspaper. Dr. Bob Huder is the director of Center for the Shark Research at Mote Marine, and Dr. Jorge Angulo Valdez heads the Marine Conservation Research Group at the University of Havana.